Ravi, Sophie, Jane. Hi, this is Indrajit.
So it's it. Do we want to start?
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah. Hi, everyone. This is Indrajit Gupta on behalf of our Founding Fuel team. That's Kavi, Anmol, Ramnath. Uh, I kind of welcome you to this second Clubhouse chat. This is the second one in a month-long program that learning program we've been running on Founding Fuel. It's based on the research and ideas done by Jane McConnell, who's also with us today. She's a familiar figure now for folks who follow Founding Fuel. So welcome, Jane. Lovely to have you back. Jane, you're on mute, I think. Okay. I'd also like to welcome two other special guests today who are joining us from Brussels and Bengaluru, Sophie and Ravi, both of whom are part of Decathlon, the French sports goods maker, which all of us are familiar with in India as well. So, a very warm welcome to you, Sophie. Great to have you.
I'm so happy to be there. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you, Sophie. Lovely to have you. I also like to welcome Ravi Sinha, who's joining us from Bengaluru. Ravi is the HR manager at Decathlon in Bangalore. So, welcome, Ravi, to the session.
Thank you, Kavi. I hope all of you and everybody who is listening, they are doing well, fine. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. So, Ravi, I'll hand over to Kavi. This is Indrajit. But before I do that, one quick housekeeping thing that you might want to follow the audience. We've kind of created a Google Doc that enables you to kind of keep track of the conversation, and there's a simple way uh, to find that Google Doc. If you notice, my colleague Ramnath, he has a Bitly link there. So if you use that Bitly link, it will take you straight to the Google Doc where my colleague Shweta Basrao, who's our head of operations at Founding Fuel, she's making some fairly copious notes of this conversation. So that'll help you keep pace. It'll also become an interesting artifact. But coming back to the conversation, meet the unconventionals inside Decathlon. That's the theme of today's session. And I like my colleague Kavi to tell you a little more about what we have planned. Over to you, Kavi. Thanks.
Thank you, IG. First of all, I just wanted to check in if Jane, are you able to hear us? Not sure if Jane's able to hear us or if she's able to unmute herself and speak. Okay, this sure promises to be an interesting conversation. Okay, so I'll just give you some context about why we started out with this and how we are where we are. Um, So Jane has been researching the idea of what it takes to have a different mindset, and she calls it the gig mindset, to be able to work well in the modern settings. And we've been in conversation with her for a while, and we've also been following her work. And as she was talking about her work, and she's got a book which is coming out very soon, and you'll hear more about that from Indrajit when we finish this conversation. But as we've been working on this topic, she talked about a particular organization where she's seen this at work and play, so to speak. And therefore, we got very curious about what's the organization where she's seen a concept which she's been researching at work. And she pointed us in the direction of Decathlon. And it's rather, I mean, and as we were thinking about this topic, and as we were talking to both Sophie and Ravi, we ourselves got introduced to a rather unconventional organization, and I think it starts with how it's pronounced very differently. And I think we carry an accent when we say Decathlon. Um, I think Sophie and Sophie specifically will pronounce it very differently. So, Sophie, can you talk a little bit about Decathlon? And you may want to please start by correcting my pronunciation and giving the right pronunciation of how you pronounce Decathlon, and give us a little bit of context about this whole bit around ways of working in Decathlon.
If I could just jump in for 1 second. Sorry, Sophie and Kavi. I had to reboot Clubhouse and I'm available now.
Okay.
So it's all done. If you don't mind, I'd like to introduce Sophie because I had such a fantastic experience with her.
Of course. I mean, there are some moments in time when your heart beats so fast and then it calms down immediately. And this is one of those such moments for me. So
Exactly.
over to you, Jane.
Thank you for your understanding. I don't know what happened. Sophie, I'm sure you remember, so I run a group of digital managers in big companies. We used to meet in Paris before the pandemic, and now we meet online. I invited Sophie to join us one time and to talk to us about what she was doing at Decathlon. And the thing that was so much fun, Sophie, that I remember is you suggested very strongly that we meet at a store, at a Decathlon store. So we didn't go by any means to a normal meeting room. We were walked through the store. I remember we had to sort of push the people to come along because they were all stopping and wanting to look and buy things in the store. And we got everybody up to the meeting room. And then you introduced yourself and how you work. And it was so striking. I think you had about 5 or 6 people out of my group of 15, 16 people who were ready to apply for a job at your company. So voila, that's my memory of how we met. Over to you now, Sophie, to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Jane. Actually, that might give you a glimpse on the Decathlon company culture. Most of our offices are always like on top or behind the store. It's just a daily reminder when you go to your desk, when you're working into the services, to remind you who you are working for, and who you are working for is the people in the store. So that may be a start to understand what Decathlon is. But to make a little feedback on the company, and Ravi, don't hesitate to help me on this one, but Decathlon is a French company. So yes, it says Decathlon, but we're in 54 countries now. So a lot of people say differently depending on the language. It was founded 40 years ago, and we have now 90,000 teammates all over the world. I think one of the specific things to understand about Decathlon is that it's not only selling sports products. A lot of people don't know that, but all the R&D, conception, production, and logistics until the by Decathlon teammates. So that makes a big difference regarding our competitors. And that's also one of the reasons we manage to keep low prices. Because the aim of a company is to sustainably make the pleasure and benefit of sports accessible to all. I don't know if Ravi, you want to talk a little about Decathlon India?
Sure, Sophie. Thanks a lot. You kind of explained very well the mission of the company. My journey started in Decathlon a little over a decade when it was just a big building that I discovered with a lot of sport products inside. And it was kind of fascinating because when you are a sport lover yourself and to have a club in your hand and take a swing or probably see those lovely football boots, it's it's like a paradise candy shop for young kids. And that's how I got introduced to the concept of decathlon on the big hoarding written play more pay less. So when I joined decathlon, we were like a very small startup in a very tiny location in Sarjapur in Bangalore. But a lot of people are not aware. We actually started our operations way back in 1999 when we were actually supplying to the retailing distribution channels in Europe mostly. So since then, we had a group of almost 20, 25 young engineers who were working in the factories, mostly in textiles and a few hard products in north of India. Now it's been more than 10 years, and we have received a lot of love and adulation from our users and customers for being very true to our philosophy of making sports accessible. uh, we believe that there is a lot more to do, especially in a country like India, because sport is not the first priority. And this pandemic has actually taught us, if nothing else, that the well being is so important. And for me personally, it has been quite a change working with Decathlon, but also truly understanding the real sense of being a sports person. So today, as we speak, we are close to 4,000 teammates working in 40 different cities in India. We are designing, we have the first brand that we created outside France, which is FLX for cricket. We manufacture our products through our partner suppliers, and we also distribute not just through stores, but a lot of distribution happens through our online channel. So I'm very, very pleased to talk to all of you, and it'll be a great pleasure to explain about our journey also in India and my personal journey as well. Thank you.
Ravi, I'd be very interested in knowing what you were doing before you discovered this dream job of living your sports aspiration. What did you do before then?
So I studied in a very small town, Bokaro Steel City, which is in Jharkhand. It's in the eastern part of the country, and I graduated from NIFT, which is a fashion technology institute in Chennai. Post college, I felt that a life in garment manufacturing is something that I would enjoy, and that's how I started my journey as an industrial engineer in a factory in Bangalore, south of Bangalore, actually. Uh, this was way back in 2008 when I just discovered the job, and it was something where Bangalore, which was considered as Silicon Valley of India, was kind of oozing out with a lot of new things which was happening. Few startups that we were actually getting to know about, and my interest primarily shifted from garment manufacturing to retail. Actually, I felt very connected with people. I felt very connected with customers for because I had a short stint with my previous employer, and I realized that it's very hard to contain me in the four walls of manufacturing. And what I looked for was interaction, moment to share, uh, a possibility for me to connect. And that's when I actually first saw Decathlon. I felt it's a dream job because it connected sport with retailing. So that's a bit about my past journey, Jane.
Thank you very much. I find that really, really interesting. Sophie, could you give us a little sense, a little taste of your journey pre-Decathlon?
Yeah, sure. And I feel like Ravi had really like a journey that was really restricted at the discovery of himself. My journey was more like an accident. Actually, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life when I graduated, and I ended up doing IT because at the time, lots of jobs were required in IT. And my first job was in a company that's called Auchan. It's another French retailer, big retailer. But I was 19 at the time, and the company culture was really reluctant to movement. So I was arriving with fresh eyes and wanted to change everything, and people would answer me something like, "Oh, but it's been 14 years." 40 years we're doing things like that, we're not going to change. So I was extremely frustrated in my first job, and I ended up in Decathlon. That's a funny thing because it's like the headquarters are on the other side of the highway from Auchan headquarters. So I really like just crossed the highway, and that was also an accident. I started working at Decathlon because I was speaking English, so they just hired me for that. And so when I arrived in Decathlon, I was really um, afraid because I thought that all retail company was sharing the same culture. And when I heard about the values that are responsibility, generosity, authenticity, and I forgot the fourth one, but I thought it was just words on the wall. And after 6 years working at Decathlon, I realized that it was not just words on the wall, but actually a really a culture really of trust, and I was given so much responsibility so fast, and I was growing so much that I decided to join Decathlon for a permanent position.
That's very interesting. You both have stories that seem to reflect a culture, a work culture that is quite different from most companies. Certainly, I know tons of companies, having worked in the advisory world of working with large global companies for over 20 years now. And I know that Decathlon is quite different. Would you be able to give us a sense of how you would, like, if you had to describe your work culture in 2 or 3 words, each of you, how would you describe it?
So I have to tell you that it was indeed it felt like a job when you actually applied, but after working in Decathlon, and it's a personal testimony which can also explain very well the culture of the company. I'm not from human resource background, and in India, it's pretty normal that you should probably you need to have an MBA degree or you need to come from a human resource background to work in the department. And it so happened that my job started in Decathlon as a supply chain manager. And then after that, I moved as a brand manager. As much as I enjoyed working, uh, I was given the responsibility to manage the human resource for the country way back in 2011 or 12, actually, which I felt was it was quite surprising because I absolutely had no clue and I was not very sure why it happened. And that was my first understanding about the culture of the company, where we say that we give responsibilities too early. And it's not important to, have a qualification. All that is required is a very strong motivation, uh, performance, and a drive to actually take, go to the next step. And that's when we were actually we had a first profitable store, and we kind of understood our business model. And then I understood that my role is to actually support, which is again very important part of the second part of the culture, which I actually understood pretty interestingly, that the decision is always taken by the one who is impacted, by the customers. So we have the principle of decentralized organization. My role really is to enable how the leaders, they are actually taking the decision in their own perimeter. So if somebody is working in a city like Dehradun, when they have to hire a trekker or a cyclist, it's not Ravi from Bangalore who is going to actually do that job for them. And that was kind of very interesting for me to understand, because it really resonated a lot with the values of the company when we say generosity and responsibility, the other two values about vitality and authenticity. So I connected a lot. In fact, very interestingly, I actually worked in Decathlon for about a year, and then I left Decathlon for a short period of 45 days, only to realize that I have made a mistake, and it's important for me to realize that and probably get to do something which I cared about so much, and the purpose really was well understood, and also resonated a lot with the values of the company. So I also discovered a lot about the company, the things which is written on the four walls. How does it make sense, and how does it actually imply on every individual, and how is it interpreted? So I would say that it has been a fantastic journey so far, with a lot of learning and uh, a roller coaster ride. So that's from my side. Sophie, I'm sure you have to add something.
Yeah, actually, let me jump on what you were saying. I had the same experience as you, Ravi, being offered job. I didn't know anything about. I remember one of my second job. I think it was in Decathlon, and they were asking me like really IT technical stuff that I didn't know anything about, and I was very transparent, saying, "Yeah, I don't know the technology you're talking about," and the hiring manager reaction was, okay, awesome, you're starting Monday. And I was really, as well as you, confused at first, but they were giving me responsibility on things I didn't know about. But what I would like to add on this is something that is really strong, that I felt really strongly, is the right to make mistakes. And even though I was trusted, my leader trusted me to be able to take this responsibility, I didn't feel any pressure at all, because I know that I could fail and learn from my failure and start over again, and my leader will still be supportive of me. So that really helped me explore new topics. I realized, as I told you, IT was just a random thing I got into. And I really realized quickly that IT was not my thing, and that people were my thing. So I was able to go and try do communication. I then joined the sustainability team, and then I was able to go to Belgium, where I'm now, where I'm doing a role that is really close to what people would expect HR to be doing.
Kathy, I think you were going to make a comment or ask a question.
Yes, Jane. I was uh, more wanting to see how this data sits with your research and what that points to about this organization, and especially from your point of view, because you've been speaking very highly about the organization, and what from their stories kind of triangulates well with the research that you have been doing.
That's a good question. I always think about that whenever I listen to people talk about their jobs. One thing that is very much part of the bold, what I call the bold new breed, which I also call the gig mindset, meaning people think like a freelancer, even though you're a salaried employee. And thinking that way means you take a lot of initiatives and you assume responsibility for those initiatives. And one of the behaviors that I studied was the fact that people who are part of the bold new breed, you see a problem, a challenge in your organization, you don't wait for someone to raise a question. You don't go to your manager and say, "What do you think about this?" You deal with it. You maybe put together a small team of whoever the right people are, and you move with it, and you take a responsibility. You're accountable for what happens. And that was sort of ringing in my head as both of you were talking, Sophie and Ravi, the ability to take initiatives, and to taking initiatives to solve problems is one thing. One thing, in answer, Kavi, to your question about my research, is in my research, the reason I called it a bold new breed is that very often management is not comfortable with these initiatives. And people have to be strong and bold in order to actually do some of these things. And you have to stand up and raise an objection to the status quo. And I think, Sophie, we've talked about that before, where you've had situations where you raised issues about the status quo and were able to bring changes about. So, Kavi, does that answer your question a little bit?
Yes, it does, Jane. Thank you. I think we will perhaps listen to both to Sophie and with Ravi about their own stories to further the cause of what does it really take to be an outlaw within Decathlon itself. But anyway, over to you, Jen. I think you have a way of extracting the best out of them.
I don't know if Sophie and Ravi like to have things extracted for them, but I think they are both extraordinarily interesting examples of trendsetters.
Yes.
As I know you, Sophie, much better, Ravi, we're sort of getting to know each other for the first time. But just starting again with you, Sophie, you told me a really interesting story some time ago about how leadership was supposed to behave, sort of the ideal leader in Decathlon. And you challenged that in a pretty significant way. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, Jane. Yeah, so right now, one of my main topic of interest is actually diversity and inclusion. And one of the things I saw when I arrived in Decathlon, Belgium, is that out of 100 leaders, there were only 3 women, and including me. So that was like really a shock to me. And I was thinking about that. And I think one of the reasons we arrived to that situation was in part due to our HR process. And as you may have understand, but Decathlon culture is very strong, and part of this Decathlon culture is you are being evaluated not only on hard skills like project management or time management, but also on the soft skills. So, for example, the communication. And I was looking into that soft skill list, and there was something that really struck me in this is one of the example that was giving on how to evaluate someone if someone's communication is good or not. The example was I strongly communicate my opinions, and reflecting of it, I realized that's something you most of our soft skills were actually really oriented toward a certain gender. But this soft skill list existed for almost 20 years. So it was really part of a company culture. But for me, it was one of the reasons that people were not evaluated fairly depending on their gender. So we decided to actually work with all Decathlon Belgium teammates, so that's like 3,000 people. And the question we asked them was, what do you want to live when you're working at Decathlon Belgium? What are the behaviors that you would like to see when you're at work? And from that, we updated the existing list, and it was so interesting to see because we really created that list with all the teammates that some behaviors like transparency, like being a good listener, like being authentic or empathetic, was what our teammates wanted. And that's really changed in the collective imagination what a good leader at Decathlon should look like, or I must say, how a good leader should behave.
Yeah, that's interesting because it was a very bottom up change, a bottom up energy that you brought, that you, how would I say, you triggered a bottom up movement to change the concept of leadership. That's very powerful, Sophie. Congratulations on doing that.
And
Ravi,
I must say,
yeah.
first time I talked to it about, I talked about changing that to my country leader. His reaction was not the most positive reaction.
Uh-huh.
So it took a little bit of convincing him to really go and try to change things. But I think that was worth it.
Interesting. Ravi, do you have an example for us of something that you did that went against the status quo and triggered a difference in Decathlon India?
Yeah, I mean, in the hindsight now, I feel that there are a few things that we actually did which challenge the status quo in many ways. One of it is we take a lot of pride in saying that a teammate is in charge. You know, they are in charge of their project, they are in charge of their development career. But often, when it comes to salary, when it comes to remuneration, there's always, it's a very sensitive subject and kind of a taboo where one has to talk in hush hush and not probably speak out uh, and I feel that it's such a source of displeasure amongst the teammates, the employees in the company, because they are unable to take, or I would say they are unable to get engaged in their own salary. And this kind of bothered me a lot in the earlier days of my job as HR leader. Uh, but it so happened that I was part of an event where the leader of Decathlon announced that his own team will decide their salary, and I felt this whole idea to be extremely glamorous to pursue without actually understanding the real intent. And I so went on writing a uh, few notes about what should be done and how to pursue it, and how we actually can take it forward. And I was pretty happy that we can actually do some change in India, only to realize it much later when I made a presentation to our uh, team of leaders in India. It bombed. It bombed terribly because uh, nobody was convinced why we have to talk about decide your own salary. It's a subject which came across as a very sensitive subject, something which people felt extremely personal, uh, and the fact that nobody did in past was not helping my case. And then eventually we did a few things, and I'll be happy to explain in this conversation. But I felt that the mere thought of deciding your own salary is not just about arriving at a figure. It's so much about actually challenging the thought process of leaders, because handful of leaders actually decide the salary of the rest of the company. And my thought process has been that if these handful of people, if they cannot take the decision correctly for themselves, how is it going to impact the team? How is it going to engage the team? And it's one subject that we often ignored, in human resource. When I actually spoke to a few of my colleagues from past, from other organizations, it comes with a lot of ifs and buts, with a lot of the benchmarks and uh, Excel sheets and information. But at the end of the day, how do we promote fairness? How do we promote what Sophie was mentioning about transparency of information, and how do you help someone realize that what's the value that they actually add and the value that they consume. So this exercise was very intense exercise where it was also about, let's say, challenging my entire perspective about human capital and what it should be like.
I think the points you're raising there are quite deep topics that obviously we are not going to be able to get into today. But raising the questions about what is involved in talking about salary and who makes the decisions and what value do people bring? How do you evaluate the value that people bring is an absolutely fundamental thing that companies need to talk about, even if they don't come up with any magic answers. Just before we go any further, Kavi, I was wondering, do we have any questions or comments from other people in the audience?
Yeah, we will open the questions in about 2-3 minutes, Jane. So I think maybe you can
Okay.
ask one more comment, one more exploration of an area, and we'll get back to people with. We can ask
Okay.
our audience to be ready with questions or comments if they have.
Okay, well, I've got a topic that I feel very strongly about, and that is the idea of networking, the ability that people have to communicate with and interact with other people across their organization, and especially outside their organization. And Kathy, you asked me earlier about some of my research, and my research has shown consistently, and I've been doing surveys since 2006. The last 2 years have been about the gig, but I've been doing it about the organization in general for over 10 years now. And networking has always been low in terms of what people say that they do. And external networking has been especially low. And the people who have I would say, the strongest gig mindset, the way I evaluate it, do much more external networking than do people who pretty much restrict their activities to exchanges with colleagues. And I'd be curious to know what you, Sophie and Ravi, have to say about networking internally and externally. Sophie, I know you have an interesting example with your ongoing program of diversity and inclusion. That's based on networking a lot.
Yes, it is. Ravi, if it's okay, I'll start on this one. Actually, when we start working on diversity and inclusion, I realized that we did not have a lot of the competencies that was needed. And being from an IT background, my first idea.
Do you have a Wi-Fi problem, Sophie? Or is it me?
I'm losing Sophie as well, so I think it's more a connection problem at Sophie's end.
Exist
Okay.
when I don't know how to do something. So my first instinct was to reach out to other Decathlon countries. So I was talking with Ravi here from India, but also Mariana from Hungary or Giorgio from Italy about what they were doing towards more diversity and inclusion. But the thing that was frustrating me a lot is it was always one-on-one conversation, and I was seeing so many great things being done in each country, but it wasn't shared with the rest. So I really wanted to create that space where people can have conversation, share their questions, or share what they are doing. And so the idea was really to spread something there, inspire each other, and create connection between countries so we can all work together on this issue and actually go faster and stronger together. But when I was also networking with other GNY responsible in other companies to see what they were doing. So when I created the first international meeting on diversity and inclusion for Decathlon, I realized that I was only inviting people from Decathlon, and that was not a diverse team. So I really opened the meeting to external companies or even anyone really who wants to join. And we ended up having one of our main competitors that it's called Intersport, that, that is, yeah, I think well known, that joined the meeting, and we ended up creating a workshop together on how to design more inclusive products for both our customers. And I really believe in what you're saying about networking, and especially networking externally. It is so powerful.
Yeah, I think that it's something that enables people and companies to do what I call horizon scanning. You scan the horizon around and beyond yourself and beyond where you live and work, and you become aware of what's happening around you. And I think it's really, really important to remain competitive and just to be satisfied with what you're doing. Kevi.
Yes, Jen, we have questions. We have two people. We will at least have Debosses, who's got a question for you, and for I don't know who the question is for. So Debosses, over to you.
Yes. Hello. Thank you very much, Kavi and Indrajit and Jane. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. And I was listening to Ravi with a lot of awe and admiration. I don't think we can talk about that, about selecting your own salary. But on the point of diversity and inclusion, my first comment is networking is mandatory. And not just within your organization, but outside your organization. I would actually go on to say that kind of the way I have lived, Indrajit knows very well, like, is to throw yourself at every problem, every opportunity, whether it is in your field or work or not, because at the end of the day you will need to provide value both to your peers and your seniors, and it is very important to interact and work with various kinds of people, and especially in various time zones or various cultures. So but sometimes what happens is that you get less time, and sometimes there is a bit of a resistance, internal resistance, kind of, uh, are you devoting the time that you are supposed to your main field of work? So what is the best way to get around this question? And the second thing is that you obviously get to speak or interact with various people, and you learn various cultures and various ways of working, and sometimes they are in conflict with the way that is things are done in your organization, and you believe that that is a better way. So what I want to know from everybody is, have you ever had this kind of an experience, and how have you actually got around this, is to bring a culture from a different organization into your own organization?
Sophie or Ravi, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I can go ahead. Debashish, it's a great question actually, and whenever we speak about diversity and inclusion, you're so right to say that as much as interaction is required within an organization, it is so much required also externally, because the whole dimension of inclusion is changing and becoming, let's say, it's to keep the existence of the company alive, or any organization for that matter, because the culture is always evolving. And very often, as an organization, if we are looking and peeping too much within and trying to find alignment, I think we will do a mistake of adding to the culture, especially in a situation in the world that we live in right now. I mean, we are in the we are in the world of platform, and there is so much of revolution happening in digital space. I know some of the greatest organizations, they actually collaborate with different companies technologically, but this technological integration happens only because there is a great inclusion in terms of mindset, thought process. And that's very crucial for any organization to actually not just survive, but to thrive in a 21st, being a 21st century company. I would say it's not easy because it really it's about adapting to changes. But I think there are many visible examples with kind of persistent, gentle nudge, and what Sophie mentioned as well. People like her, and even what we do in India as well. It's very important that we stay persistent to the big global thought on where we want to go and how do we reach over there. Because at the end of the day, we are talking about integration of talent, we are talking about integration and coexistence with different companies. And together, I guess many organizations have actually they really need to dig deeper to say that what's the reason of their existence. Because I think that definition, that purpose will actually be very useful in order to make inclusion more natural rather than keeping it as a force fit or making it just a DNI agenda. For me, diversity and inclusion is not just an agenda. It's about promoting the culture of the company and also having a very strong stake in terms of performance.
Something I like that you said, Ravi, I think your phrase is really powerful. You said a persistent, gentle nudge. Because I think that when we're talking about big changes like this, it has to happen little by little. I worked with a company in Paris called Air Liquide, a big global company. And there was a guy there who started this thing that didn't appear to be very big, but it turned out to have major impact in that he would once a month have an external guest speaker come to their headquarters in Paris at 6 o'clock in the evening. The workday was done, and talk about what they were doing at their company. And the room was packed with people start coming in the room at around 5:30, 6 o'clock. I went to several of the sessions, and I found it hilarious that I could see some of the real top managers at the back of the room listening and very involved in that activity. And it was a persistent, gentle nudge that this guy was doing. Kavi, were you going to say something?
Yes, Jen, just a question. I'm curious with the experiences that both Ravi and Sophie have, that such risks that you take within a traditional organization requires a certain propensity to handle risk, because such, if I were to call them adventures, also have risks attached with them. I'm very curious to know how Sophie and Ravi, or either of them, or both of them, kind of learned. What did they learn from these kinds of risks that they have taken? And also, what does it take for such risks to get taken within an organization?
I think I'm going this one. Thanks, Gary. I love your question. Um, it does require risk, but in my head, I don't know about Ravi, but in my head, risk equal opportunities. Like this great girl I know that's called Celine Schillinger, and someday she said, like, if it's not hard and you're not by yourself, that means you're not really changing anything. So for me, if I feel something is risky, that means that I'm really challenging the status quo, and that I'm really making a deep impact. If that feels too comfortable, that means I'm just changing things on the surface, so that's not really worth it. And if I can give you a good example, we're talking about networking and external networking. Due to the COVID last year, we had to shut down all the stores in Belgium. and only the food store were allowed to be open. And thanks to some people I knew in major retail food store in Belgium that's called Colruyt, I just called them, and they were short of staff, and we had plenty of staff that was on technical unemployment. So we just decided that unemployed people could go and give them a hand and work for them for a couple of weeks. And that proved to be like a great thing, because first of all, we helped them during a hard time, but also our teammates who went to work for another company also learned a lot. And when they came back, they were able to share some of that knowledge with us. And yes, it was risky because we have like a one teammates that decided that Colruyt was better than Decathlon and decided to stay there. But I think the value that was created by this initiative was way more than the risk we were taking by doing that.
Yeah,
I'm
Ravi.
going to jump. Yeah, it's a brilliant question because we speak about taking risk. I would like to say there are three things which really helped personally in my journey as well. The very first thing is about an environment which is based on trust, because I think trust and sort of an engagement is very important, and it's a very unique relation. It cannot be organization versus an employee. The relation is very personal, and it's very uniquely shared between a manager and a team member. And I think great leaders actually create people who would take those bold risks because they are probably great because they have taken those risks. And I can truly say that in many of my projects, I was talking about the project around the decision on your own salary, even though it was a big disaster in my first presentation, but there was this sort of trust that I shared between myself and my manager, and we knew that we have to drive it, and I have to find a way, and that's something which is very important. The second element which I feel is very important, as much as we talk from the perspective of a manager, which is around empathy. So we expect our managers to empathize with us. And I think it's also important that we empathize with the situation of our managers. Sometime when I make presentations or when I actually come up with different thoughts, we encourage a lot in Decathlon people to take courageous decisions or take some risks at their respective site, keeping in mind that how would it impact the company. And I think this is very important part because you are actually not satisfying just a shareholder, but you are actually empathizing with people who are sitting in those chairs and looking at your presentation because you are going to do it someday for your team. And I think the sense of empathy is quite a two-way traffic. It's never one-way traffic. And last point, which I feel is very, very relevant, is credibility. I think they genuinely people want to take risk, and genuinely leaders and managers they want to allow people to take risks. But what is sometimes missed out is the debrief on what happened after. And I have seen very good examples where the credibility has been earned uh, because there is an element of performance which has come by taking that sort of a risk, be it with regards to team motivation or increasing in market share, uh, improving the top line or bottom line of the company, or a customer delight or satisfaction. Uh, Credibility has got a very important role, and often we leave it to our board meetings or annual reviews, but there is credibility in our day-to-day action, what we say and what we do, and that makes a lot of favorable environment for more and more people to actually take risks, because at the end of the day it translate into certain useful results which everybody can reap. And eventually, as a company, uh, I guess every organization wants to invest in people so that instead of just one person or a group of top leaders taking all the decision, how can this responsibility be shared? So for me, these three things are very crucial when you say that what it takes and what happens after. There is this element of trust, important element about empathy, and finally credibility.
So, Kavi, does that answer your provocative question?
Okay. Yes, it does. It just at least gives us a very good frame to think about how do we help organizations foster this space for taking risks. Um, we have Arvind with us. Arvind, would you have a question for us?
I do. Thank you for this conversation. This has been fascinating. Uh, Talking about unconventional thinking and external networking, I actually live in Peru, in South America, and hearing about what Decathlon does, I thought I should mention this is kind of a segue, but should mention that Cricket Peru won an award from ICC for having a social innovation project where they helped kids who are part of their organization to make their own cricket bats with PVC pipes and duct tape. So I'm just wondering if that could be something Ravi could work on in providing cricket gear to Peru. There is an active following. There are British expats, and I play cricket on the roof. I went to uh, a carpentry shop and had a bat made, and we play cricket on the roof every now and then. I'm just curious as to that is it's not like a pitch for trying to expand your market or something, but I'm just saying there is an active market in Peru for following cricket, and affordable cricket gear would be something that I think Cricket Peru would really appreciate. So sorry, this is a segue. It's not completely related to everything we're talking about, but affordable sporting gear and external
Okay.
networking. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think we've been talking about risks and entrepreneurial mindsets that people can bring in. I'm sure this is going to be fodder for thought for both Ravi and Sophie to think about how we possibly can take it to South America as well. So thanks much for that, Arvind. Jane, we are entering the last few minutes in this conversation, so over to you to tie it in for us.
Well, I'd like to add with a thought that actually you triggered, Sophie, when we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and ask both you and Ravi a very simple question. And the question is, do you personally feel that through your life and your work that you are making a difference in the world, not just in your company, but in the world?
I don't know if I do, but that is my intent. I feel that it's a huge opportunity for me to be working in such a big company, because every change that you implement not only touches the 90,000 employees, but also their families, also the clients, also suppliers, and all of these indirect people working with us. So I really feel like with by working at Decathlon, I can have a huge impact, and yeah, that is something I aim for. I don't know if I'm gonna manage to do it, but I would really like to have an impact that big.
You said to me when we talked that you said we, meaning Decathlon, we can't change the world by ourselves. That's why we need to work with everybody around us. And that was actually what triggered my question.
Uh,
Uh,
uh, that's right, and especially when we're talking about diversity, inclusion, and all this sustainable societal issue. I mean, the issue are bigger than Decathlon, and I do believe by working with everybody, that's the best way for us to be able to advance on this issue. We're not going to be. I know Decathlon already has a big impact, but if we have if we have partnership with other companies, we can even have bigger impact.
And how about you, Ravi? Do you have a sense, just in a real short response, do you have a sense that you're bringing change to the world, Decathlon?
Yeah, Jane, with a lot of humility, I can say one of the reasons why I actually enjoy working with Decathlon is because I feel there is a very strong resonance with my life's purpose and also the purpose of the company. I would like to be useful, I consider myself as someone who can help. I'm not very sure if I can change the world, but I'm very sure that uh, given an opportunity and also finding those opportunities to be helpful to people is something that I really, really like. And it's something that is a big purpose of my life. And it resonates a lot with Decathlon because eventually sport is just a way, it's our business format. At the end of the day, for a country like India, I think playing sport is not just improving the health and hygiene conditions, but also fostering a lot of community integration, which is so important for our country, for example, and of course for the rest of the world. And I'm so glad to connect with you, Arvind. Let's take it offline soon. But this is very interesting because sport has so much to give and it really connects people. So that's my side of the story, Jane.
Thank you. And I would definitely like to take that offline with you, Ravi. I have some other questions. I want to thank you both. I think, first of all, I think Decathlon is very lucky to have people like you. I think you found a place where you can really make a difference. And I think that's fantastic. I think I'll just conclude on that note. And thank you both very much for sharing in such a, I would say, a deep personal way with us what your experience has been and what your experience is, and for being so honest with us. Thank you very much. Over to you, Kavi.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Ravi, for what's been a brilliant conversation. We at least got a few insights uh, about where you draw your passions from, where you draw your energy from, and what it takes to be what we call as an outlaw within Decathlon itself. So the next time we get to the store, we'll go with a lot more perspective of what goes behind the scenes. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure listening into you. And Aji, would you just want to speak a little bit about the masterclass that's coming up?
Yes, yes. So thank you, Kavi. Lovely listening to both of you, Sophie and Ravi, your journey at Decathlon, and for Jane for making this happen. Thank you. We've got some exciting stuff planned. This month-long masterclass that we've been hosting, a bold new breed, based on Jane's upcoming book, which is going to be out, I think, 27th, Jane, of May. Is that correct? Did I get the date right?
You got the date right. I hope you're going to be
Great.
standing in line in front of your
Yes.
computer. So
Thank you for that. So we've got some exciting stuff planned now because it's going to culminate with a live masterclass on the 24th of this month at 6:30. And I will invite all of you back for that. There's been a pretty interesting response to the masterclass, which Jane will be part of, and we've also got Ravi Venkateshan, the former country manager and head of Microsoft, and the current UNESCO special representative, and Santosh Desai, both of whom need no introduction, and Kavi will be back again to facilitate that conversation between the three. So we really try and kind of unpack all that we've learned in the last 1 month. But before that, on the 21st, on Friday, some of those of you who've kind of participated in a survey that Jane was kind of running with us, the results of that will be available to all of those who participated and to people who've registered for this masterclass. It'll give you a good perspective of where India fares on that journey, on the gig mindset, and and how do we kind of match up over a period of time, because I think Jane's been running that survey since 2018 and we've got some fresh responses from India this time again. So let's see how the needle has kind of moved. So that's what we've got kind of planned. Do join in because it promises to be exciting. And on that note, I'd like to kind of thank all of you who've joined both on Clubhouse as well as on the YouTube live stream. Today perhaps is the last time that we're going to have to do this live stream because the Android Clubhouse app will be out on Friday in India. So hopefully there'll be more of you joining us directly on Clubhouse. But on that note, I think you've given us plenty to chew on, Sophie, Ravi, and Jane, from your research. And we love this whole idea of an entrepreneurial mindset. That's very core to what we do at Founding Fuel. So hopefully we'll have some scintillating conversation again on the 24th. So till then, goodbye and take care and have a great week ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Stay safe.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.